We are in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, actually. We're on chapter 3 and 4 on the workbook, the worksheet, I should say. Yeah. And here we're on page, actually at the bottom of page 4. We're getting into chapter 4 and verse 4 of Ecclesiastes this evening. Again, Ecclesiastes chapter 4. This is interesting. He's getting ready to deal with a variety of just some different subjects. But when you're looking at verses 4 through 16 of Ecclesiastes chapter 4, honey, did you need a copy of pages? Oh, you got it. Okay. But with the pages, when you're looking at chapter 4, verses 4 through 16, it shows, I think, really how people are more important than things. I want you to notice a few things here that kind of point to that very fact here in verses 4 through 8. Notice what it says here, Ecclesiastes 4, verses 4 through 8. This is the King James Version. Again, I considered all travail and every right work, that for this a man is envied of his neighbor. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. The fool foldeth his hands together and eateth his own flesh. Better is an handful with quietness than both the hands full with travail and vexation of spirit. Then I returned and I saw vanity under the sun. There is one alone, and there is not a second. Yea, he hath neither child nor brother. Yet is there no end of all his labor, neither is his eye satisfied with riches. Neither saith he, for whom do I labor, and bereave my soul of good? This is also vanity, yea, it is a sore travail. This point number 3 is contentment and being a workaholic is really what he's talking about here in verses 4 through 8. I just want you to notice this back in verse 4 again. It says, again, I considered all travail and every right work, that for this a man is envied of his neighbor. Basically, what that's showing there is a person can't work their way to happiness. There's always going to be someone envying them. This is kind of similar to what I saw in a video one time. There's this guy. I can't tell you what his name is. He's an older guy, but he's always kind of giving different financial advice and stuff. He's similar to Dave Ramsey a little bit, but not quite the same. As a matter of fact, they say a lot of the same thing, but they also don't say the same thing, if that makes sense. They disagree when it comes to, for example, credit cards. And things like that. But one of the things he said kind of stuck with me a little bit. He pointed out, and I'm kind of basically kind of giving you an example of what he said rather than exactly what he said. But he pointed it out like this. You know, the billionaire, he envies a person who's retired or someone who doesn't have to put in much effort to work. Well, the millionaire, he envies the billionaire because he wants more money. The person, that finally got to their first $1 million, they're like, well, I wish I had a little more than $1 million, you see. And it kind of goes into a process downward. A person who, for example, may own a very nice car. Well, they probably envy a millionaire, for example. They don't have $1 million, but they have a nice car. They envy the man who has $1 million. And then the person who has a used car. The person who has the used car, he envies the person who has the nice car. And then the person who has a clunker envies the person who has the nice used car. And then the person who is riding a bike to work every day, he envies the man who has the clunker. And then the person who is below him, walks. He envies the person who has the bike. And then the person who, you just work your way downward, you see. Someone's always envying the one person or more above them. And the person who has junk shoes, he envies the person who has nice shoes, who's envying the person who has the bike. You see, that's how that process works a lot. And so, again, just as you can't really find happiness in riches, again, it's person's always going to be envying something if they're taking this approach, trying to find happiness in wealth. A lot of times they kind of view it like that. It's the same way with labor. Someone wishes that they had as much money, for example, as Elon Musk. They wish they had his position as being CEO of several companies and things like that. Well, you got people that are below, maybe the board of directors wish that they had his position. Well, there's people below the board of directors who wish that they were on the board of directors. They envy that. And then you got the people below them wishing that they were them. People below them, again, go all the way down. And you can even go as far as this. The person who's unemployed wishes he had a job, maybe at one of Elon Musk's companies, you see. It's just envying right there. The person is always going to be a person who tries to find happiness and work and labor is just not going to find it. That's his point there. If that's where you're trying to find your happiness, you're just not going to. You're going to envy someone else. You're going to be envied by someone else. That's just how that works. But again, that's verse 4. Verse 5 of Ecclesiastes chapter 4. Verse 5, notice he goes to the very extreme other position here. He says, the fool foldeth his hands together and eateth his own flesh. Let her be here. Again, this is you might say the other, I'm trying to think of how people usually put it, but the other drastic measure, if you will, the complete opposite. This is someone who's not working at all. Whereas someone trying to find happiness in work is addressed in verse 4. Verse 5 is, here's the other extreme. That's the word I'm looking for. The other extreme. Here's the guy who doesn't even want to work. And it says that the fool foldeth his hands together and eats his own flesh. Again, he chooses not to work at all. Any questions or comments on those two verses, verses 4 and 5? Verse 6 continues, better is an handful, this is the King James Version, a handful with quietness than both the hands full with travail and vexation of spirits. Basically, what he's saying here is it's better to be content with a little bit than to strive endlessly to get rich and get richer and still envy the next rich person. And then, this goes on from there. The millionaire envies the billionaire. The billionaire envies Elon Musk, who I think's currently still a trillionaire. I know the stocks, yeah. I knew the stocks went down, but I think he still kept his trillionaire status and all of that. But just think about that. That's, again, better to be content with just a little bit. Why? Why would that be the case? Why is it better to be content with just a little bit? Why is it to be do what? Yeah, you're thankful for what you have. Yeah. Uh, yeah, and you're not going to exhaust yourself. Just like, worrying about wanting more and desiring to want more, and your thoughts occupy your mind on how to get more. You see, a person who's content isn't going to be, I wish I was a millionaire. I wish I was a billionaire. I wish I was up there with Elon Musk and the second world's trillionaire, or even more than that. You see, quadrillionaire. We'll go another step further. Again, a person, again, this is why it's better to be, again, handful with quietness, better to be content with little. Again, handful, a little, a handful. That's what that means by handful. Then both the hands full with travail and vexation of spirit. Again, trying to work and trying to get as much money as possible. Again, envying and wanting more. Any questions or comments on that? He continues on then in verse 7 and 8. Then I returned, and I saw vanity under the sun. There is one alone, and there is not a second. Yea, he hath neither child nor brother. Yet is there no end of all his labor. Neither is his eye satisfied with riches. Neither saith he, for whom do I labor, and bereave my soul of good? This is also vanity. Yea, it is a sore travail. This is being a workaholic. And this, I want you to notice this here. He's being a workaholic. There on letter D underneath point 3 there on page 5. Letter D, the futility of being a workaholic. Number 1 under that says, many times, as in this context, someone becomes a workaholic just to make more money. And I think that's what he's getting at here. Someone might become a workaholic for various reasons. They may like spending time with their coworkers. They may be a workaholic because they like what they do so much and they just want to get away. Maybe it's something to occupy their time. They're trying to get again, they do it to occupy their time. Maybe they don't have much else going on in life. Things like that. They become a workaholic. But here, it's the workaholic who's just trying to labor more and more and more and get basically more wealthy and things like that. Notice there, number two, though, what's being addressed here. Just notice here in number two, in several cases, the workaholic might not even have a family to make an excuse for why he works all the time. I mean, that's his point here in verse 8. Again, he doesn't have a child. He doesn't have someone he's taking care of. He doesn't have a brother. He doesn't have someone who he can make an excuse and say, well, I'm working so hard to give them a better future. Today someone might say, well, I'm working so hard. I'm working all these hours just so that way they can have a college education. There's nothing wrong with the college education, but he'd be using kind of here in verse 8, he'd be using that as an excuse, you see, for being a workaholic. He's trying to work again and he's got kids and he's trying to work and work and work, and he's making the excuse, well, I'm working so much because of my kids, when really he's trying to get wealthy. He's trying to get more money. He's trying to, and this isn't on the basis of, trying to get more money to save up for retirement or help kids. This is just someone trying to get rich through labor. That's all that this is talking about here. And so when he's not satisfied. It says, neither is his eye satisfied with riches. Before that, there is no end to all his labor. He's working and working and working. He's a workaholic. He's not satisfied with the money. He just keeps working, keeps getting more money and things like that. And then at the end of the day, he's not finding any happiness in it. Yeah, he's not going to take it with him. He made that point back in chapter 3 and 4. Yeah. Or rather back in chapter 3, he made that point. Yeah, you can't take any of the wealth with you. He's going to make that point in chapter 5. He made it in chapter 2. When a person dies, it's all going to be left to a descendant. And if this man doesn't have a child or brother, he's working to maybe help out a brother, his brother, maybe his brother's, maybe this is one of those situations where the father's dead and the brother's basically, got no one to raise him, so he's raising his brother. Things like that. Again, this is someone who's being a workaholic, and it's just going to a point where he's getting rich and rich and rich, but none of those riches satisfy him, and he's just going to end up dying and leaving it to whoever, maybe a distant cousin, things like that. Any questions or comments on that? Yes.
Just when I done some research a couple of years ago, $1 trillion. It's hard for us to fathom money. That is.
Yeah.
We throw around numbers like a million, a billion, a trillion. But in order for a person to make a trillion, if I were to pay you $1 every second, it would take me 32,000 years.
Yeah.
To have $1 trillion. So, when you have these people who have that much wealth, the Bible has a lot to say about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
In New Testament, he talks a lot about wealth. Mm-hmm. Those who are rich need to learn to do good.
Yeah.
With their wealth. And, a lot of times we have people who try to push for ways to make the wealthier even more wealthy. Mm-hmm. We need to look at that from a biblical standpoint. Mm-hmm. That's the way God sees things. Mm-hmm. So he has expectations for those who are wealthy to take care of those who are not wealthy.
Yeah.
The Old Testament is full of that.
Yeah.
Even with the planting your crops and leaving the corners for the migrants to have for free. They didn't plant them. They didn't take care of them, but he wants you to leave those so they can eat them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you see that a lot. You see that Christians who are wealthy are commanded to share with Christians that are poor. You see that over and over again. 1 Timothy chapter 6, the one who has much, or rather, he tells Timothy to concerning those who are wealthy or rich in this life to share with those who are not, share with those who are poor. He makes that point in several other passages as well. But again, that is a valid point through all of this.
And it's funny, but still it isn't, that this lady, she had a lot of money. And her kids were, right there trying to get it. She left everything to charity to take care of cats.
I think I've heard of that one. I heard that somewhere. Yeah. Yeah, but that's, that some people are just waiting for a relative to die to get money and things like that. Squander it, do something with it. But yeah. But yeah, you see this overall point again. Someone's a workaholic, and this goes back to that. And maybe they're not sharing their wealth with the poor. Things like that. Even on top of that, though, they get wealthy, and the whole overall point, of course, is here's people getting wealthy. They're not going to get satisfied with that wealth. They accumulate 10 1 pound bars of gold. That's not going to satisfy them. They're going to want 10 more. They're going to want 20 more. And just keeps going and going and going. It goes back to what he's going to say in chapter 5 and verse 10. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves abundance with its increase. In chapter 4, verse 9, then, he says, two are better than one because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him that is alone when he falleth, for he hath not another to help him up. Again, if two lie together, then they have heat. But how can one be warm alone? And if one prevail against him, two shall withstand him. And a threefold cord is not quickly broken. And so this whole section here, verses 9 through 12, is talking about the value of companionship, the value of having companions, the value of having friends, basically. We do, of course, read in Proverbs, a man of many friends may come to ruin, but there's a context to that, of course, because, he's going to have people asking him money and things like that. It's almost like the friends is in that word friends, that word friends is in quotation marks. A man of many friends may come to ruin. But here, again, this is the value of having a companion. He says two are better than one there in verse 9 when it comes to labor. Why? Why do two have a great reward for their labor? There's a question right there. Why? He says that two are better than one in labor because there's a great reward for their labor. Why is that? What would this great reward be?
Share one another.
That could be a part of it, yeah. That would be one reward. Would there be any other reward for two being better than one? Two together laboring together? Maybe some practical reasons. More work gets done. You're mowing the lawn or mowing lawns. You can get more lawns mowed that way. You're planting crops. You can get more crops planted that way. And even harvest will go by that much quicker if there's two rather than one person working. You see that's the whole point. There's benefit in that labor because now there's two working and not just one. Uh, Two are better than one due to mutual care. That's verse 10. Again, if they fall, one will help up his fellow. You're walking along, you fall. If you don't have someone with you, you're going to be in trouble. I can't imagine, some of these trails. I think I don't know if they had a friend with them or not, but when someone fell out here on one of the trails out somewhere here on the mountains, they were out there and someone fell off the trail. Well, if they didn't have anyone with them, how likely do you think they would be to survive? Matter of fact, they had to get a helicopter to get her out. Matter of fact, I think she may have been alone, but she had a phone. Well, imagine not having a phone. Imagine not having anyone with you. Well, you're going to be in trouble if you fall off that cliff. You're just laying there, and because you don't know if there's going to be anyone there that day.
Area where you get.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't know, and on top of that, yeah, you may fall into an area where even if you have a phone, you may fall into an area you may not have phone service. Uh, some of the internet out here isn't always reliable. Uh, we have Spectrum, and usually about once every week or once every other week
Yeah.
goes out. So I've been told, well, try this one, and I hear other people say, no, that one don't work as well either, or that one's worse, and that one is a little better, but it also has issues. And it's like they all have issues, yeah. Some of you may remember. I don't know if this. I think it encased the entire country when AT&T, all of the country was affected, and the entire phone went out. But yeah, you fall off the cliff and you need help, And that something like that happens and you're by yourself, you're in trouble, you see. And so, again, this is why companionship is good. Having a friend is good, is what he's talking about here. Any questions or comments on that? This is even good in spiritual terms when you think about it, because if you're trying to follow the Lord, it's good to have brethren, because the brethren will help you. Maybe you're trying to study the scriptures. I don't know what this means. Well, brethren can help with that. Brethren, elderly brethren who have studied the scriptures longer can help with that. You see. You look at the next one, verse 11. Again, if two lie together, this is talking about in a marriage, two lie together, then they have heat. But how can one be warm alone? Again, during cold times, married couples can do that. And they are able to keep each other warm. Two are better than one when it comes to safety and defense. That's verse 12. If one prevaileth against him, two shall withstand him. And a threefold cord is not quickly broken. You may have someone who's 6'5" like me come up against a 5 foot, let's just say 5'5" person. Well, I might be able to, someone my height might be able to take them down. But if there's two of them, it's going to be harder. You see, they can defend each other in that situation. Any questions or comments on that? Felt like a piece of hair went in my mouth. Maybe I need to shave my beard. I don't know. But let's see here. But yeah, that's the whole point of verses 9 through 12, is to show the value of companionship. He continues on into verses 13 through 16. Better is a poor and a wise child. This is an interesting section here. A poor and wise child than an old and foolish king, who will no more be admonished. For out of prison he cometh to reign. Whereas also he that is born in his kingdom becometh poor. I considered all the living which will walk under the sun, with the second child that shall stand up in his stead. There is no end of all the people, even of all that have been before them. They also that come after shall not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and vexation of spirit. We see here two things. He shows vanity, futility. Some of your translations might say useless. He's showing the uselessness of pride and popularity here. There's two different things going on here in this section. You got pride and popularity. Notice this: better is a poor and wise child than an old and foolish king, who will no more be admonished. Over and over again, we see in the book of Proverbs that a fool will not listen to counsel. This king is refusing to take advice. Again, he doesn't want to do things in a new way, maybe a more efficient way. He's going to do things his way. It's his way or the highway. And that's an attitude of arrogance and pride right there that's being shown. Better is a poor and wise child than an old and foolish king, than that guy who is arrogant. The young wise man, the young wise child, is one who's taking advice, and it's better than someone who's elderly and refuses to take advice. That's his point there. Again, the old king is pride and arrogant. But notice verse 14. For out of prison he cometh to reign. Whereas also he that is born in his kingdom becometh poor. The poor person could be just fresh out of prison. This person who's becoming king, this child, fresh out of prison. If he is looking to become king, he's going to take advice. You see, he's fresh out of prison, but he's willing to take advice. The young man, verse 15 and 16, I considered all the living which walk under the sun, with the second child that shall stand up in his stead. There is no end of all the people, even of all that have been before them. They also that come after shall not rejoice in him. Surely this is also vanity and vexation of spirit. He's trying to take popularity now. That's the second child, the one who's replacing the old and foolish king. He's coming and he's getting elected by popularity. Why? Because he's actually willing to take advice and not be arrogant and prideful, you see. And so what happens is he's coming into with popularity, but guess what? How long does popularity tend to stay with people? There was a lot of popularity uh, for several actors. You ask someone to a lot of kids, for example, my age, folks my age, kids in their teens, young people, young folks like me, 28, young people in their 30s. You ask someone who among us are who's Lucille Ball? I don't know. Well, most people will say I don't know. Yeah, yeah. Most my age and younger are going to say I don't know. Who's George Burns? I don't know. Who's Gracie Allen? I don't know. You see, popularity is something that is, as one brother put it, it's fickle, is what it is. It kind of sways, and who knows when it's going to go one way or the other. And it's the same thing here. The person who is elected by popularity, who cares? At one point the people are going to love him, and then the next generation could very well just hate him. Hate him. It's like, well, we want someone else. We don't like your policies anymore. Things like that. Any questions or comments on that? Showing how popularity is just something that you shouldn't be relying on. Pride, and it's showing the uselessness of pride and popularity through this section. But again, when you come to this conclusion, then of as we've been going through chapters 3 and 4 of Ecclesiastes, Solomon's search continues. He repeatedly shows the same point he made back in Ecclesiastes 2, verses 24 through 26. Happiness and purpose cannot be found in the things of this life. It cannot be found in riches. It cannot be found in working. It cannot be found in those things. It can only be found in God. Injustice occurs. He pointed that back out in verses 1 through 3 of chapter 4. But God will judge. Without God, we are nothing more than animals who live and die. Back in chapter 3, he made that point. Companionship is better than being alone. Popularity and pride are futile, useless things. That's what we're seeing there in chapters 3 through 4. Any questions or comments on those? On that there? Let's go ahead and continue on and then into chapter 5 of Ecclesiastes. Chapter 5, on the introduction there, as Solomon continues this book, he addresses his search for meaning in chapter 5, the first 7 verses. A lot of people think that this appears to be an interlude involving one's attitude in worship and vows, and that could be very well the case. Another argument that some people make, or rather another thought that people make on this particular verse or section here, verses 1 through 7, some people say this is Solomon kind of making some application based off of what he has said in previous chapters, pointing. Again, his overall point is you need God. His overall point is life is meaningless and truly sad without God. You see, that's his main point. And so in chapters 1 through 7, he's saying, here's some things that you need to understand, you need to do in order to keep and having God in your life, keep being on God's side, and keep, you might say, being on God's good side, if you will. Keep following the Lord and things like that. Things that you need to do in order to be still basically a faithful child of God. Of course, this applying at that point in time to the Israelites. But here, again, chapter 5, verses 1 through 7 is going to talk about worship and vows. Verses 8 through 20, it's going to give a lengthy dialogue, a lengthy discussion on basically the futility of riches. And then in chapter 6, he's going to show that the things of the world cannot satisfy. He's going to kind of go over that a little bit, maybe a little more detail given to that there in chapter 6. Any questions or comments before we get into chapter 5? Chapter 5, beginning in verse 1, it says, "Keep thy foot when thou goest to the house of God, and be more ready to hear than to give the sacrifice of fools. for they consider not that they do evil. Be not rash with thy mouth, and let not thine heart be hasty to utter anything before God. For God is in heaven, and thou upon the earth. Therefore let thy words be few. For a dream cometh through the multitude of business, and a fool's voice is known by multitude of words. When thou vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it, for he hath no pleasure in fools. Pay that which thou hast vowed. Better is it that thou shouldest not vow than that thou shouldest vow and not pay. Suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin, neither say thou before the angel that it was an error. Wherefore should God be angry at thy voice and destroy the work of thine hands? For in the multitude of dreams and many words there are also diverse vanities, but fear thou God. And so this is an interesting section right here, what he's getting at with these vows and talking about coming before God in worship and coming before God. He's literally talking about when they come before God in the temple, or I guess it would be the temple at this point that Solomon's writing this. Before that, it would have, of course, been the tabernacle. But here, he's talking about this, and he's really telling them, he's saying, careful with your worship and speech. That's what he's saying here. Be careful when entering the temple. That's verse 1. Again, he says, keep thy foot when thou goest to the house of God. That doesn't mean you go into the house of God and trip, you're sinning. He's not saying something like that. He's basically saying, be careful how you behave. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. But yeah, he's saying, be careful how you behave. Don't use your words in a foolish way. That's what he's going to point out in the next verses. Again, keep thy foot when thou goest to the house of God, and be more ready to hear than to give the sacrifice of fools. That's an interesting phrase right there. What would a sacrifice of fools be? And why would it be more important to be more ready to hear? That's kind of a twofold question right there. But let's think about that first one. What would a sacrifice of fools be? He had all kinds of sacrifices there in the temple. All of them, of course, would be sometimes for sin, sometimes various sins. But why? Well, what would a sacrifice of fools be?
We don't know what their sacrifices for.
That would be part of it. Yeah, that would be one example of a sacrifice of a fool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It could be that. It could be, in some instances, it could be that they are willingly ignorant that they're doing evil. Or maybe they know it deep down, but they're choosing to ignore it. Things like that. That would be a sacrifice of a fool. They're not acknowledging their sin. They're just bringing in a sacrifice to offer a sacrifice. They're not sacrificing for sin. They're sacrificing maybe just to look good. Maybe just because it's a daily routine. Maybe it's something else. But they're not making the sacrifice because of sin. They're they're not acknowledging their sin when they bring the sacrifice. Maybe they're bringing it just to look good. Things like that. But whatever it is, he's not acknowledging his sin, and that's the point. He's not acknowledging his sin. They consider not that they do evil. Again, you continue on. Just notice some of these things here. Verse, actually, think about this. Why would it be more important to be more ready to hear? That's the second half of that question. Why would it be more important to be? What does he even mean by that? Be more ready to hear.
To understand?
Yeah, yeah, that'd be part of it. Yeah, more ready to hear, be ready to understand some of the things that are being spoken. Maybe the priest is saying things. For example, the priest when he's offering the sacrifice, maybe he's saying things as he does it, and he's pointing out that this is because of sin. Maybe the fool isn't paying attention. You see. Number three, on number three there on letter A on page 2. How would this verse be useful for us today? Of course, what is the implication of teaching for us to take from this in our relationship with God? What can we take from this passage? What verse would this? How would this verse make an impact on us today? I guess. What can we learn about this verse that we need to take with us today? We don't have, of course, we don't make sacrifices today. We don't make those sacrifices of the Old Testament. We don't go to a temple. We don't go to a tabernacle and try to offer sacrifices like that. So how would you make this an application, I guess, today? I think one thing that comes to mind is we better be acknowledging our sin. That'd be one thing that comes to mind. We better not be like this fool and be foolishly ignorant or arrogant and not even, well, actually, no, ignorant is the word, and not, behaving like this. And you even see some more things in this as you kind of read through this. He's not using his words wisely in the context. That's another thing there. Maybe he's just kind of talking rather than paying attention, talking and yapping and not paying attention. Well, sometimes that can be described of Christians. Instead of listening to what's being taught, instead of singing with the words, they'd rather focus on, okay, what do we have for lunch today? What do we have for supper today? What do we have, or focus on something else entirely? Yeah, not paying not giving attention is the idea. Not being ready to, uh, you know. This is a guy who's just kind of yapping and flapping his chops around. This fool here, as we can see in the context, he's not paying attention to what he's saying. Notice what he even says here in verses 2 and 3. Be not rash with thy mouth. You see, that's what this fool's doing here. Be not rash with thy mouth, and let not thine heart be hasty to utter anything before God. For God is in heaven, and thou upon the earth. Therefore, let thy words be few. What's he doing here? Now, I want you to notice this. One of the ways he's being rash with his mouth, the context is telling us, is he's not being careful with his vows. He's making vows and he's not paying them. Verse 3, for a dream cometh through the multitude of business, and a fool's voice is known by multitude of words. That's a weird verbiage right there. What's he talking about when he says that? There's a dream. Why is he bringing up a dream all of a sudden? Kind of weird bringing up a dream when he talks about the words of the fool. If you actually go, when you're looking at verses 2 and 3 as a whole, you see that, of course, the point. When he's saying, let your words be few, he's saying, don't be a babbler, don't give lip service, don't try and get it in and out and talking the entire time to try and pass the time and ignore what's actually going on in the temple. Again, people could do that. Instead of paying attention to the fact that here's an animal being sacrificed for their sin, they're like, well, let's try and get out of this and get in and get out and try and get out, and I'll just talk and yap, yap, yap in order to pass the time. That's what this guy's doing. Yeah, yeah. As a matter of fact, they're on point number 3 there on page 2. At the very bottom of the page, he's using the example of a dream. You had people who dreamed different kinds of visions back in the Old Testament. You, of course, had Joseph. He had dreams, and then he would interpret dreams. And you had, of course, Daniel. He would interpret, for example, Nebuchadnezzar's dreams. Nebuchadnezzar would have dreams, and all kinds of different examples like that. But here's the thing: with all of that in mind, sometimes dreams were just dreams. You think about it this today. If I fall asleep and I have a dream that, some crazy dream, like, let's say a politician walks into my room and says, hey, you want to be king of America? Does that mean anything? No, it's ridiculous. You see, it's ridiculous stuff. And that's exactly what he's pointing out here. Dreams give worthless, useless information. That's what dreams tend to do. They give you worthless, useless information. And he's saying that's exactly what the fool is doing. He's doing worthless, useless, speaking worthless, useless words when he comes before God in the temple. Any questions or comments on that? You continue on. We'll continue on with verses 4 and 5. It says, of course, that vows need to be kept. Now, here's an interesting thing. Verses 16. Someone read for us Matthew 23, verses 16 through 22. Matthew chapter 23, verses 16 through 22. I want you to notice something that the Pharisees used to do. The Pharisees had a big issue back in the New Testament, that they would not keep their oaths. Matter of fact, they had ways of giving oaths and vows that they would not keep. They had special vows that they set aside. Someone read for us again Matthew chapter 23, verses 16 through 22.
Woe to you, blind gods, saying, anyone swears by the gold of the temple which shall by his silver. You blind fools, for which is greater, the gold or the temple that has made the gold sacred? And you say, if anyone swears by the altar, it's nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift that is on the altar, he is bound by his oath. You blind men, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? So whoever swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. Whoever swears by the temple swears by it and by him who dwells in it. And whoever swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by him who sits upon it.
And so we see all through that section there, he is clearly making the statements. That's what the Pharisees did. They would say, well, if you swear by the temple, guess what? You don't have to keep that vow. You see, they often had these kind of vows so that way they could get away with lying to soldiers. You see, they would say things like, and sometimes the zealots might say this if they were trying to use trickery. But this is one of the things that they would do. You know, if a soldier said, "What about this? What about this?" or you need to come with me. I demand that you swear. They say, "I swear by heaven. I swear by the temple. I swear by the altar." And they didn't have to keep that vow. They didn't have to keep it. If they swore that they were going to do something for a soldier, they could break it if they swore by one of those things. You see, you even read this a little bit in their traditions. They had special swears, special oaths, special vows to where they could break them. It's kind of like what we do today. I'll give you an example of how we do this today, at least how fellow man does it today. We should never do it this way. Sometimes kids do this. Well, maybe they agree something like, "I'll give you my candy bar if you give me your sandwich." Okay. And then when they try to trade off, you doesn't bring the candy bar. I have my fingers crossed. It's kind of like the swearing that's going on here. The vows, the oaths. It's no. I got my fingers crossed. I swore by heaven. I didn't swear by the gold of the temple. I swore by the temple. You see, that's how it worked back then. That's how they were doing that. Again, vows that were false vows. It's interesting. You actually look in Matthew chapter 5. Someone read for us Matthew 5, verses 33 through 36. He was actually correcting the abuse that they were putting towards vows and oaths. Matthew chapter 5, verses 33 through 36.
Again, ye have heard that it said, that hath been said by men old time, thou shalt not perform unto thy oaths. But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is city of the great king. Neither shall there swear by thy hand, because those cannot make one hair black white.
Just notice through all of that. You go through all of those verses there, and he'll continue on and say, "But let your yes be yes, and your no be no." And the whole point of that is, I mean, you should look at all those. Those were what people swore by, and then they would turn around and say, I had my fingers crossed. Basically, again, that was what they were doing. He's basically saying, do not give the cross your fingers oaths, the cross your fingers vows, things like that. He's saying, don't be doing that. You see, don't be behaving like that. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Let your word stand. You see, he's not, by the way, condemning vows entirely. We take vows today. For example, those of us who are married, we took a vow to be faithful to our spouse. Of course, we're all married, not to each other, but between the three couples that are here, me and my wife, you guys to the left, you guys to the right, we took a vow to be faithful to our spouse. We also, if we're ever put into a court, they'll have us put our hands on a Bible. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth? So help you God. Well, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, they still lie. They might as well have been crossing their fingers again. To a lot of people, to even atheists, they'll look at the Bible as, well, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to tell the truth because I don't even believe in it. So for an atheist, putting their hand on a Bible is perhaps very similar to crossing your fingers, you see. But all of that to just show you that when you come back here to Ecclesiastes 5, 4, and 5, once again, when thou vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it, for he hath no pleasure in fools. Pay that which thou hast vowed. If we vow something, we better keep it. Verse 5, better is it that thou shouldest not vow than thou shouldest vow and not pay. Suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin. Neither say thou before the angel. And likely, by the way, that word angel can be just translated as messenger. And so when he says angel, and maybe better translating to messenger, it may be actually a reference to the priest who's there. Because they would, of course, make their vow before the priest. And things like that. They would maybe vow to give a certain amount of money. And the priest is there to confirm that. But again, neither say thou before the angel, again, perhaps the priest in this regard, that it was an error. Wherefore should God be angry at thy voice and destroy the work of thine hands? For in the multitude of dreams, notice that, and many words, there are also diverse vanities. Again, futility, useless. Dreams give you useless information. And if you talk and talk and talk and talk and give vows you're not even going to plan on even fulfilling, you just gave a useless vow, you see. Again, but fear thou God. Any questions or comments on it, on that section there? It's interesting. The word, again, he's again comparing vain words, futile, useless words to dreams. Dreams give useless information. Again, someone comes if I have a dream that a bunch of characters from a fiction story, let's say Darth Vader comes into my room. Does that mean anything? No, that's useless information. That's useless information. That's useless. That's just a useless thing I'm seeing while I'm sleeping. It's the same thing with these words. He's saying if you're just going to be yapping and talking and giving vows that you don't even plan on keeping, that you're just using your words uselessly and incurring the wrath of God. And he even notice he even says there at the end, but fear thou God. A person who behaves like that doesn't even fear God. A person who isn't even going to fulfill their vow to God is not behaving with the fear of God. And fear meaning reverence, respect. Any questions or comments on that? There's a lot of information there in just that 7-verse section there of Ecclesiastes chapter 5. And Lord willing, we'll continue on with verse 8 and get into chapter 6 next week. I want to thank everyone for your attention this evening.